What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week 7 preview, and there's a lot to go through in this one. So we've got midweek info from the Champions League that is relevant to FPL. I'm going to look at captaincy, free hit, bench boost, answer some of your questions, and look at forward options as well. So let's get into it. So let's start with some midweek info. Spurs, Chelsea and Liverpool all had Champions League games last night, and there's definitely some information that's relevant for FPL. So for Spurs, Richarlison started again. We know that Solanke has had minor, I think, ankle surgery, so he's going to be out in the short term. Not 100% sure what the time frame is on that, but we know Richarlison's first choice. So he's going to start the majority of games. I think there's a lot of question marks, especially from Spurs fans, about whether he can keep playing midweek, weekend, midweek, etc. He's already had a rest after the international break. That could come again. So I wouldn't be buying him right now, but if you've got him, I'd probably keep him for the Leeds game at least. Spence and Porro were fullbacks. Lots of Porro owners obviously worried about him being benched last week. He's probably fine for Leeds, and he might start Villa as well. I don't think it's going to be a case that he's benched every other game, but it might be like 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 6, something like that. So long term, he's someone you're going to have to deal with, but in the short term, I wouldn't panic right now. Xavi Simons and Kudus were both benched, so they're definitely going to start against Leeds. If you got both of them, or one or the other, you can definitely play them. No need to sell them before that fixture. For Chelsea, Tyreek George started up front. João Pedro was benched. Now, it feels like every press conference recently, Maresca has said that João Pedro's got a small issue they're looking at or they're managing or something like that. I don't think it's something huge because he was on the bench. We couldn't have been that injured, and he did come on. But it's just something to monitor. I wouldn't put it off. Sorry, I wouldn't let it put me off keeping him. I think if you've got João Pedro, you've got to hold. I don't see why you'd sell him with the fixtures they got coming up. And also, as Chelsea do these days, another red card, this time for João Pedro. So bench, came on around 60 minutes, then got red carded. That means he's suspended for the next Champions League game. And luckily for owners, and I hate this as a non-owner, the game is between game week 8 and 9. So international break, game week 8. He's going to get rested midweek for the Champions League game, which means he's definitely going to start game week 9. What fixtures game week 9? Sunderland at home. As a non-owner, I was kind of hoping there was a chance his minutes would be reduced for that game. Probably not going to happen now unless he gets injured. So if you've got João Pedro, I would definitely be keeping. You could maybe even think about bringing him in. We'll talk about forwards later on. For Liverpool, ISAK, Bradley and Salah were benched. I don't think it was a surprise to see ISAK benched because obviously Ekitike missed game week 6 through suspension. A little bit strange to see Salah benched. We're not really used to that. And look, he's going to get the odd benching every now and again, but he was also rested recently in the Carabao Cup. So I was a little bit surprised to see him on the bench. I don't think this is a sign of things to come, but maybe, thinking quite far ahead, game weeks 13, 14, 15 is weekend, midweek, weekend. Could he get benched against Sunderland at home in game week 14? Maybe. We'll come back to that, at the time, and we'll see how many times he's benched in between. But they lost the game. So I can't see Salah being on the bench too often going forward, and we know how fit of a player he is, etc. So this is not to scaremonger people. Salah's not about to be benched in the league. I just thought it was interesting that he got benched after recently getting benched. I've just said bench quite a lot then, so I'll stop saying it. Frimpong was right wing. That is something we might see when Salah goes to African Cup of Nations. Gakpo was subbed early again around the 60th minute. What was interesting was Ekitike moved to the left. So we can see by now that Slot's trying different things. It could be that Gakpo and Ekitike miss out and Wirtz has kind of got a free role. Ekitike could play off the left in some games, as we saw briefly last night. But then if you're a Gakpo owner, Ekitike went off potentially injured. Now, it looked like maybe a hamstring problem to me, but there are reports coming out that it could just be cramp. So we'll have to wait and see what Slot says on Friday. But if Ekitike is injured for a little bit, Gakpo's minutes go up, although it doesn't guarantee he's going to start still. I still think long-term he's got to go. And obviously it would make ISAK a much better option. So all of a sudden, ISAK might be on the menu. Now, I don't think he looked particularly great last night when he came on. I still suspect he's probably struggling for match fitness. I wouldn't go for him until probably game week 8 onwards and come back to it then. And obviously, if Ekitike is not injured, I still think there's a little bit of a risk to the minutes there. But if Ekitike's out, ISAK becomes a lot more appealing. It's definitely someone to look at maybe after the international break. And Alisson also went off injured. So if you're a Van Dijk owner like me, not great for clean sheet potential because Alisson was pretty good last night and he was definitely great against Palace. Like, the only reason Palace didn't score more goals was because of Alisson. Mamadashvili, who is not, that is a name that's not as easy to say as Alisson, 4.3 million. If Alisson was out for a while, that would be super tempting. And I know people will point to Liverpool defence and say it's not looked great recently. And I get that. But honestly, for 4.5 or below, you're really not going for the Liverpool goalkeeper if he's going to play a lot of games. I think most of you would. Now, if you've got Raya, etc., obviously you just keep. There's no point in making a goalkeeper switch. But if Slot said on Friday Alisson's out for months and you're about to wildcard, I'd absolutely have the Liverpool goalkeeper for 4.3, even if, by the way, he's your second keeper and you just pay 0.3 million more than Dubravka. Chances are Slot will just say he's going to be back soon. It won't be a big deal. But it's just something to monitor. Alisson basically flagged straight away that he needed to be subbed. And he is a goalkeeper that picks up a lot of injuries. Not necessarily out for a long time, but it does happen. So we'll monitor that and see what Slot says on Friday. But yeah, lots of good info for FPL. João Pedro one, absolute killer as a non-owner. So let's talk about captaincy for game week 7. And I feel like I'm going to be saying this a lot over the next few weeks, specifically game week 7 to 10. Haaland is probably the best option, especially when Salah's got Chelsea away. You could maybe make an argument for Salah between game weeks 8 and 10. But this week specifically, definitely not. It's got to be Haaland. And you might want to look at like an Arsenal player against West Ham, maybe even Man United if you feel like a punt against Sunderland. But on paper, it's Haaland. The guy is averaging over 6 games so far, 1.31 non-penalty expected goals per 90. Absolutely ridiculous numbers. And he's not even had any penalties yet. Bearing in mind, Salah I think has had 2, Fernandes has had 3. Once you start adding in those, if hopefully he takes them, which I think he will, unlike in the FA Cup game, even if Marmoush is back, I'm pretty sure Haaland's taking the next penalty. You know, the numbers could be crazy. And Brentford away is not a bad fixture. So I think on paper, he is the best option. If you've got Salah, by the way, I don't hate it because Tosin is probably going to miss out through injury. Chalobah's suspended. Chelsea do have defensive issues right now, but it's still Chelsea away. It doesn't feel like a great captain. I mean, Salah generally, maybe not this season so far, but generally is not ever a bad default captain. But I feel like if you're going to go against him, it's this kind of week. So if I had Salah and not Haaland and an Arsenal player or like a Man United attacker, I'd be taking the punt outside of Salah, I think. For Arsenal, a lot will depend on the European minutes tonight in the Champions League. If Saka goes and plays 90 midweek, that would make me question his minutes a little bit at the weekend and would probably put me off. With Gyökeres, it's hard to know because even if he gets subbed early tonight, we saw that recently, the last Champions League game I think it was, you know, he could get subbed early against West Ham. You know, if anything, I think Haaland's minutes are a little bit more secure than both of them. But Gyökeres has played 490 minutes in the last 5, and I think he will be on penalty. So if you're going to go Arsenal attacker right now before I've seen the Champions League game, I'm going to say Gyökeres. Otherwise, it's maybe a Man United attacker. Like, I would probably go Fernandes over Salah, but I wouldn't necessarily go Fernandes over Haaland. I don't think I've got it in me to do that. And obviously, Sunderland are sat in 5th place. The expected goals conceded have been pretty good so far, but Man United are at home. And actually, the expected goals they've put up over this season hasn't been that bad. And I'm not saying Man United are good. They're not back, etc. They're pretty rubbish. But I think they're capable of scoring 1 or 2 goals against Sunderland. Maybe more, but probably not. And if they're going to do that, Fernandes, Cunha and Burma all could easily be involved. I still think Fernandes is the best option because of penalties, etc. But there's a little bit less confidence around that. If you wanted to go for like an Mbeumo or Cunha captain because you don't have Haaland, I really don't think it's a terrible option this week. But if you've got Haaland, it's just super easy to go for him. And I wouldn't be looking for reasons to back against it. So as I do most weeks now, I put together a free hit draft for game week 7 for anyone that's on that strategy and playing the chip this week. Haaland is an obvious pick. He's going to be in everyone's free hit teams. Then you want triple Arsenal, I would say, against West Ham at home. Gabriel would probably be the first name I would put in. So Gabriel and Haaland. I've gone for double attack instead of double defence. I think a lot of people not free hitting, if they've got a double up either way, most people will be on the defence rather than the attack. I think Gyökeres and Saka's ownership's not massively high individually either. So they are the 2 attackers I would go for. But of course, monitor the Champions League game tonight. Because if Eze misses out, for example, there's a really good chance that he would start against West Ham. And then he's quite an exciting pick. But I think as it stands with the info I've got right now, Saka, Gyökeres and Gabriel would probably be the 3 alongside Haaland. I also think I'd have to go triple Villa, despite how poorly they've started the season, because it's still Burnley at home. And I think Burnley do look like the weakest team in the league at the moment. That can change, but right now that's how I see it. So I've gone for double defence, Martinez and Cash. Cash looks pretty nailed. They don't really have much competition for that place. And then I've gone for Rodgers. Now, I'd much rather play 3-4-3 with Watkins instead. And you can probably shift funds around to make it work. But when I started this draft with Gyökeres, Haaland and Watkins, I thought that looked great. But when I tried putting the rest of the draft together, it was actually quite tricky because of funds. I found that pretty much every week so far. Funds are always tight. You can't have every single player you want. So I decided to drop Watkins rather than dropping Gyökeres. But of course, if Eze didn't start tonight, Watkins and Eze over Rodgers and Gyökeres, absolutely I would do that. I just think Rodgers' stock is at an all-time low right now, bearing in mind how good he was last year, but he's still starting, and it's still a really nice fixture, and his ownership is so low. That's why I kind of added him in, because I needed someone cheap. I did look at Reinders as well, or maybe a Doku you could go for, and that's options too. But I've just gone for the home game against Burnley. But if you want to change that, I would not blame you. Minteh against Wolves away, I think, is a nice option. Then I've tripled up on Man United against Sunderland, which I know feels crazy after how bad they were against Brentford, but it's still a home game. And look, Sunderland have done really well so far. Better than Man United, absolutely. But surely most people's money is still on Man United for this game, although maybe not quite so much money as you might have put on in pre-season. So I've gone for Fernandes in Burma. It could easily be Cunha, by the way. I don't think there's much to split in Burma or Cunha. You could even go in Burma and Cunha and no Fernandes if you wanted to. And then De Ligt in defence. Pretty good for defensive contributions. Seems to be nailed. Not bad goal threat either. I don't mind that pick. So you could absolutely go for 0 Man United if you wanted to. But if you're free hitting in 7, it feels weird to dodge the Sunderland at home fixture. And absolutely, if you could make Watkins, like even looking at it now, like Watkins instead of Gyökeres to not have Rodgers does seem quite nice. But I just think Gyökeres against West Ham, he's probably on penalties. I think Watkins is probably not on penalties for Villa. That's kind of what swung it for me. But if you could have both, that would also be pretty nice too. So I'm getting quite a few questions from people at the moment about whether or not they should bench boost with a particular set of 4 players or whether they should wait until later on. Those questions are quite difficult to answer because I don't know what your bench will look like in future weeks. So as an example, on my bench this week, I've got Goodmanson, Leeds defender against Spurs at home. Not terrible, but in game week 8, he's got Burnley away. So if I'm choosing between bench boosting him this week or next week, I probably prefer game week 8. But if he's one of your 3 best defenders out of the 5 you've got in game week 8, he's going to be in your 11. Therefore, he's not on your bench boost. So you've got to go through different weeks and see how much better your bench might look later on. You've also got to factor in transfers that you might want to make as well. So it's not as simple as saying these 4 players will have better fixtures in this specific game week, because they will probably be in your 11, not necessarily on your bench. So this is the My Team tool on Fantasy Football Hub. If you want to check it out, links in the description below, or scan the QR code on screen. As always, 50% off at the moment. So this is my bench is pretty rubbish this week. I've already used my bench boost anyway, but I've got Dewsbury Hall suspended. But I can literally just go through, click the optimize button, and it will tell me what my bench looks like. Like game week 8, I've got Anderson against Arsenal at home and Dewsbury Hall against City away. Not great. Is there a better week where I could potentially use a bench boost if I still had it? I mean, game week 9, I've got a defender against Arsenal away. Game week 10, the Bravka against Arsenal at home, not great. Dewsbury Hall's got Sunderland though. Senesi Man City away and Goodmanson Brighton away. But in game week 7 this week, I'm quite likely to do Goodmanson to Gvardiol. So if I just save that a second and now go through future weeks, my bench might look a little bit better. So yeah, game week 8, Senesi's now on the bench against Palace away. You get the point, right? Game week 10, my bench would be Senesi and Evan Nielsen against Man City away. I probably don't want to do that. So I think generally, have a look through future weeks to see how much better the bench might be. I would, in most cases, use it as soon as possible. So if your bench is slightly better in game week 9 than it is in 7, I'd prefer to use it in 7 because by game week 9 you might pick up injuries or suspensions that you've then got to use transfers for that you don't really want to, just to make sure you've got a bench boost out. I would also say if you're not feeling it right now and you don't want to use it, you probably will just run into a good bench later on. Like for my team, for example, if I go to game week 12, this is bearing in mind all I've done is Gvardiol in game week 7. I've not used any other transfers and optimised my team. My bench is Dubravka against Chelsea at home, Reinders against Newcastle away, Paquetá against Bournemouth away, and Dewsbury Hall against Man United away. Because my defence is just so good, I'd play a back 5. And actually, that's something I really want to do that week, but I'll wait until I get there. You know, that's a pretty nice bench boost. I'm just going to run into a good bench later on. Game week 13, Anderson Spurs away, Paquetá Liverpool at home. Not great, but he's a penalty taker. Dewsbury Hall Newcastle at home, Dubravka Brentford away. I might just fall into a good bench later on. And also keep in mind, once you get to game week 17, it's African Cup of Nations. Salah's not going to be an option. I mean, you could even argue right now he's not an option anyway, but by then he definitely won't be. You'd have more money to spread around. Maybe you put that into your bench spot. So I wouldn't panic about it, is basically what I would say. Go and look over the next few weeks. If you want to play it soon, will you have a much better bench later on? If not, just use it. Don't wait for small margins. Like a slightly better fixture for one player is not worth waiting for, in my opinion. But if you're not feeling it, there will be opportunities later on. It's only got to be used before game week 19. Try and not stress about it too much. And I say that as someone that wildcarded just so I could get my bench boost out of the way. Not the only reason, but that was part of the reason. Because it's just, I will say, it does feel freeing once it's gone. You just don't have to think about it anymore. And also, the quicker you use it, the more it opens up options to potentially, downgrade a forward. Like if you're looking at forwards right now, thinking I don't really like most of them. Yorkeresh for me, for example, all the way down to Gvardiol is now 4.3 million. Like it unlocks 5.4 million to spend elsewhere. It's another reason to use it sooner rather than later. So just some thoughts on the bench boost. So I know I'm going to get a bunch more questions about it this week. I cannot help with your future weeks. Just go and look through what looks better. And if it doesn't, maybe get it used soon, next couple of weeks. So I had a question about Chris Wood replacements, and I thought it might be a good opportunity just to talk about forward options in general for anyone that's looking to bring in a new forward over the next week or two. These are the 6 options I've come up with. So Yorkeresh, João Pedro, Minteh, Bowen, Strand Larsen and Calvert-Lewin. So you've got a number of options over different price points. It's not to say this is a definitive list and there's no other forwards you can consider, but I think at these kind of price points, these are probably the forwards that I would be looking at. With Ollie Watkins, by the way, there is no way I would sell him to Yorkeresh this week if you've got him in your team. But if you're looking at a longer term pick, Arsenal's fixtures are just better than Villa. That's why Watkins is not here. But 1 week only against Burnley at home, I like him quite a lot. I've also not included Haaland because I think at this point, if you're going to have him, you've probably got him or you've got a plan to bring him in. And with ISAK, I want to wait and see what is said about Ekitike on Friday. Even if Ekitike's fit, ISAK probably is somewhat of an option. But personally, I want more certainty than that for 10.6 million. With Yorkeresh, honestly, I go back and forth with what I think about him as an option. Like, if you ask me now and then ask me again in an hour, I'll probably have a slightly different opinion. In some ways, I look at it and think Arsenal's second best team in the league behind Liverpool. From an attacking point of view, they've improved this year with the signings they've made, the depth they've got. He's their number 9. I think he's on penalties. His minutes look pretty good. How can he not be a great option? And then I look at him and think, he's not really showing it right now. But then he's had difficult fixtures. 0.3 non-penalty expected goals per 90 is not great for someone that's 9 million. I think he's a bit like Fernandes for me. I think the points will come. I'm just not convinced he'll be value at 9 million. But not every player in your team has to be super valuable. You've got to spend your budget at some point. This is what I mean with Yorkeresh. I go back and forth. I think overall the fixtures are pretty good. The minutes look good. And until Havertz is back, I think they'll continue to be pretty decent. So as a long-term pick for 9 million, Yorkeresh definitely over Watkins. And arguably, he's better than ISAK until we see a bit more from ISAK or we get a guarantee of the minutes, I think. Then you've kind of got the 7.5 million-ish forward. So João Pedro, Minteh, Bowen. It's not a great week to buy João Pedro or Bowen because João Pedro's got Liverpool at home. West Ham are Arsenal away. The João Pedro 8 onwards, I think looks really good. I cannot believe people are thinking about selling him. I know he's had hardly any shots over the last 3 games. Chelsea are also getting a lot of red cards. And okay, Palmer's not there, so it's not quite right either. But honestly, Forest away, Angie's Forest, Sunderland at home, Spurs away, Wolves at home, Burnley away. That's such a nice fixture run. Yeah, I might even look at picking him up. And I've kind of not been against him, I would say, but I've not really had too much interest in him most of this season so far. I might even pick him up soon, depending on what else happens with my team. He does seem to be struggling with something very minor, but every time Maresca says that, he pretty much plays 90 minutes. And okay, he got a rest in the Champions League. Maybe that's a sign of his fitness levels right now. I just think he's a good pickup from game week 8. But obviously, wait for the Liverpool game and the international break before you make any decisions. And if you wanted to delay it even further, you could just wait until game week 9. Minteh I really like. I think Palace's fixtures overall are just pretty good, apart from Arsenal away in 9. Like Everton away, Bournemouth at home. I said this with Saar the other day. There's no need to rush into it, but it's not terrible. He's 7.5 million. He's on penalties. He's nailed. He's played his minutes per start are 88. Now, Nketiah is there now, so that might drop a little bit, and they do have Europa Conference League games coming up. But he's going to start the majority of games. And from game week 10, it's Brentford at home, Brighton at home, Wolves away. So I really like Minteh. I'm still half thinking maybe I made a mistake selling him before Evan-Nilsson, but it is what it is. So, if you want the guarantee in minutes, there's no, slightly minor issue potentially at the moment, like with João Pedro. Mateta's probably the one. And then Bowen, his underlying numbers have been awful. 0.14 expected goals per 90, 0.08 expected assists, but he still gets attack and returns. I do wonder at some point if they'll dry up unless he can improve. But Nuno's there now, so you'd expect a bit of an improvement from West Ham. And after Arsenal, it's Brentford at home, Leeds away, Newcastle at home, Burnley away. So if you can, I would probably delay your decision till game week 8, because that opens up all as João Pedro, Mateta or Bowen. But I think from game week 8 specifically, João Pedro and Bowen both look really good. So yeah, Bowen's 90 minutes, no Europe and stuff like that. He might even be the slightly safer pick. Then if you're going cheaper, Evan-Nilsson I've got in my team. I don't mind it, but I don't think I'd buy him right now. Strand Larsen at 6.4, nailed. I think going to be on penalties, 81 minutes per start. Brighton at home, Sunderland away, Burnley at home next year. I think he's a good option. He's not really shown it so far. There's been an injury issue and stuff like that. But I think going forward, he's a good pick. Or you go even cheaper like Calvert-Lewin. You could go Thiago. Bit harsh to leave him off this list. He's got 4 goals in 6 games. I just don't like the Brentford fixtures. I think if I was looking for a cheap forward, I'd either pay the extra for Strand Larsen or I'd go cheaper with Calvert-Lewin. Now, Calvert-Lewin, he gets chances. He's not the greatest finisher, so he can be frustrating to own. But Spurs at home, Burnley away, West Ham at home, pretty nice next 3. Then Brighton away, Forest away, Villa at home, not that bad. And I think there has been an improvement with that Leeds attack with Calvert-Lewin in the team. So at the top end, Yorkeresh, Mateta, João Pedro, Bowen. I think if I was buying this week, I probably would go Mateta. If I was going in game week 8, I'd have to reassess then. Strand Larsen I really like, or if you want to go as low as possible for someone that's actually going to play, it's Calvert-Lewin. I think he'll be on penalties as well. So let's get into some of your questions. If we're on wildcard for game week 8, is it worth making a transfer this week? In my case, I have Dewsbury Hall suspended, so can either sell him or roll and play Juve versus Arsenal, which has more value. Now, I've said already this season, where possible, I would roll a transfer into wildcard. Because I think having 2 or 3 transfers as soon as you come off the back of a wildcard is such a strong position to be in. Because in an ideal world, you wildcard the perfect team and it stays perfect for weeks. That doesn't happen. Players get injured, players get suspended, players get dropped, etc. So having transfers is always super handy. But I guess it depends how valuable the move is. In your case, you've got a defender, and no matter how attacking he is, it's still a defender away to Arsenal. The points expectation has to be pretty low. So I think it would depend how much money you've got to upgrade Dewsbury Hall. So if you've not got anything in the bank and it's like Dewsbury Hall to stack, for example, or Xhaka, that's a low value move. In that case, I would just play Juve. If you're sat there with like 2 or 3 million, I might be tempted to get an attacker in. So let me give you my team as an example. Obviously, I don't need a wild card next week, but let's say I was using it next week. My weakest player in the 11 is probably Anderson. Now, I've got money in the bank. I could go to Gvardiol, but if I was wildcarding next week, I'd probably roll this team. Pretty simple. But let's say that Joachim Anderson's not an option. Let's just say he's injured or something. And I've got Dewsbury Hall in the team, who's, as we know, is suspended. And I've got Paquetá on the bench against Arsenal away. Again, it's not a great fixture. With money in the bank, I'd be tempted to sell Paquetá with my particular team because I've got enough money to like do Paquetá to Cunha, for example, or in Burmo, someone like that, who's got Sunderland at home. To me, if I was in a position where it was playing Juve or getting Cunha, I'd use the transfer and hope that I don't need that bank transfer after the wild card. But if you've got no money in the bank, or it's like Juve to a different 4.5 defender or something like that, you could go for it. But at least in the back of your mind, you know Juve's got a bit of attacking threat. So I'd maybe just hold it. So which has more value? It depends what you can do. And I'm not trying to sit on the fence, but that is a factor in these questions. If you've got a lot of money and you can get a nice midfielder this week with a good fixture where there's lots of attacking potential, I'd go for it over playing Juve in one of the worst fixtures he's going to have all season. If it's only a minor upgrade, I'd roll and hope for the best. So what are your thoughts on Gvardiol, keep or sell? You probably just keep him, right? He's not injured, as far as we know. He's got Brentford away, Everton at home, Villa away, Bournemouth at home next 4. He's starting regularly. Aït-Nouri's not back yet to potentially take his place, but even then, Gvardiol can just play centre-back. Aït-Nouri could play left-back. We haven't seen that yet, but that is something Pep could do. And he's got genuine goal threat from set pieces as well. So I think in most cases, you probably keep him. I guess another way of looking at it would be, if you're going to sell him, who are you going to buy that's much better? The only defender, and I know I'm mentioning him a lot at the moment, is Gabriel probably, right? everyone kind of wants to get him in. So if Gvardiol to Gabriel is your only way to get him, you could consider that because Gabriel is obviously a long-term hold. The goal threat is there. Arsenal are the best team in the league for clean sheets, etc. But outside of that, I wouldn't see a rush to go and pick up any other defender. I would just keep hold of Gvardiol. And obviously, before you think about moving to Gabriel, wait and see what happens in the Champions League tonight. He could start, pick up an injury or anything. So, yeah, I think he's fine. Like, it's frustrating that you didn't get a clean sheet against Burnley, of course. But the fixtures coming up are okay. His minutes look okay. The goal threat's okay. Apart from Gabriel, I don't... Like, even if it was like Gvardiol to Timber or Calafiori because you couldn't afford Gabriel, I'm not sure I would move it. I'd probably just hold him for now and then reassess in kind of maybe 2 or 3 game weeks. So nice and simple question. Is Minteh a good long-term pick? And the simple answer is yes. He's less than 6 million, only 5.9. The minutes look really good. He's got 83 minutes per start so far this season. And Brighton don't really have too much competition for that right-wing spot at the moment. I think in the past, I've looked at Brighton and thought, they've got so many attackers, I'm not quite sure who's going to keep starting, etc. That doesn't look likely right now. Minteh right wing, Mitoma left wing, they look fairly nailed. Now, I wouldn't completely put it past Hertzler at some point to maybe rest one of them, potentially, and put someone else there. But like I said, there's not a huge amount of options. And really, what are they resting them for? They're not in Europe or anything like that. So for less than 6 million, with pretty secure minutes, and good attacking numbers, by the way, 0.29 expected goals per 90, 0.18 expected assists, he's a good pick. Wolves away this week, good fixture. Newcastle at home, bit tougher in game week 8, but not completely terrible. Then Man United away, Leeds at home, Palace away, Brentford at home. The fixture on for quite a while, I believe, is pretty decent. So let's just bring up Minteh here and go past game week 12. Yeah, Forest away, Villa at home, West Ham at home, Liverpool away in 16, tough, but then it's Sunderland at home. Arsenal away in 18, tough, but then it's West Ham away, Burnley at home. Then City away in 21, tough, then it's Bournemouth at home, Fulham away, Everton at home, Palace. Like, obviously, we don't need to look down all the way to game week 25 because most of the time players aren't staying for that long. But honestly, if the minutes keep being good and he stays fit, like there'd be no real reason to be moving him around. I think generally, and this was kind of my thinking when I spoke about Jaden Anthony, I think yesterday, there's quite a few good options less than 6 million. But I don't think any of them are so good you necessarily need to spend a transfer to switch them around. Like if you were sat there with 3 or 4 free transfers and you've got like Stack or Dewsbury Hall, then yeah, you could maybe move to Minteh. But if you've got those players on only one move, I'd probably favour rolling more. But if you're on a wild card or you're switching funds around and you need a midfielder less than 6, I mean, you could argue Minteh's the best option. I haven't given that proper thought, so I don't want to say that's my opinion as well. But thinking of the other options, like he's probably better than Reinders. He's putting out better attacking numbers. And his minutes are probably more secure. Although we have to say Reinders has looked pretty secure so far. You know, he's better than the 5 millions. You're buying Stack, Xhaka, Dewsbury Hall because you want to save as much money as possible. But he's better than all of those in isolation if you can afford it. Jaden Anthony's obviously done really well. But I think I'd trust a Brighton attacker more long term. There's probably someone I'm missing. Someone really obvious who's less than 6 million who's much better. But I'm not sure there is. Let me just bring up the 6 million midfielders here a second. Caicedo, Gravenberch, no. Ghana, definitely not. Even though he did look all right the other day, taking some set pieces. Zubimendi, no. Pauli, no, come on. Paquetá, to be fair, not this week. But as I spoke about with Bowen earlier, the next 4 fixtures afterwards are pretty good. He's nailed on penalties. And also with Ward-Prowse being left out by Nuno, Paquetá, I think, took pretty much every set piece. He was definitely on corners. So he has become a little bit better with Nuno there. But would I buy him over Minteh long term? Not so sure about that. But 8 to 12-ish, Paquetá might be as good. Maybe slightly better when you factor in penalties. But Minteh from open play is way more attacking. So I don't think there is a better option under 6 million, to be honest. So, or if there is, they're kind of close anyway. So is Minteh a good long-term pick? Yes. And if I was wildcarding right now, would I think about him? Absolutely. I'll leave that there. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. I'll be back tomorrow for team selection, so I'll see you then.